most people didn't know of Mayfield. If they did, it probably was for something they couldn't talk about proudly.
The park's going to get bigger and better because the extra bits are not just going to be cut and paste of that, it's going to be something different.
This has to be a park for everyone.
18 months of debate about the exact shade of green.
Too many awards that we lost count.
I didn't know where Mayfield actually was. People now know Mayfield as a neighbourhood.
Okay, so welcome to OBI's latest edition of Trading Places. Delighted to be here on this very sunny day at Mayfield Park with a great lineup: Duncan, Becca, and Hen. Straight off the last episode where we talked about placemaking, this really follows up nicely. It started back in 2016. It's probably one of the best examples of a public-private partnership known as the Mayfield Partnership. Who's best to jump in and talk about how that was formed and who the parties are in that partnership?
It's probably me, I guess, even though I wasn't there at the time. But essentially, the council routinely uses strategic regeneration frameworks, and once we've defined objectives for the area, what we'd like to see, what we think will work here, what the challenges are, we'll then go out to the market to find someone to work with us on it. This one is a bit different because Manchester has got some of the land is owned by TFGM, and some of the land is owned by what was then LCR, London Continental Railways, what is now Platform 4. So it was a partnership before it was even a partnership with our development partner. Went out to the market, appointed what was then you and I, what is now Landsec. So we've got 4 partners working on this, collaborating to bring this to life. It's a neighbourhood, it's not a plot, and I think the park has been really important in establishing it as a neighbourhood.
Is it a happy partnership? Do all the partners work together?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's the importance really of setting out what you want to deliver together at the beginning, because things do get quite hard. Markets shift. The construction sector has been really challenging, as everyone here knows, and if you're going to bring this together, you're in it for the long haul. And obviously, you know, sometimes there'll be slightly different priorities, I suppose. We're, as the City Council, very, very interested in the placemaking, the affordable housing. Landsec, they're not doing it out of the love of the hearts. Viability is obviously really pressing. But I think broadly we stay aligned to the overall objectives of the place, and I think that's what, certainly as the City Council, we really value in our partners, the ones that share our ambitions for really good quality. It's not just about getting the development up and walking away. This is about really thinking about what makes these places work.
And it is an unbelievable place already. You can see how many people are using the park for all the right reasons on a Thursday afternoon, 5 o'clock on a Thursday. So it's worked. I was down here on Sunday with my daughter, Poppy. It was absolutely rammed, and she loved it on the children's play area. But Duncan, one for you. This clearly didn't look anything like this only a few years ago. And for Manchester to have, 16 acres of park?
This is 6.5 acres, the first phase, but it is growing. So people forget that this is just phase 1, so it's going to get bigger. It's going to stretch all the way to the station.
And it'll stretch into the buildings.
Exactly,
and go in
between. Exactly.
Tell us about how it started from a design perspective, and what you started with. What was here before?
Well, for a start, we were just completely inspired by the site that we found. So as somebody from South Manchester, I didn't realise that so much space, empty space, existed so close to the station. So when we first came to site on our first site visit, we were up on top of the old former depot and just amazed at how much space there was, but also how much nature there was. So there was lots of sort of self-seeded nature finding its way through the old track bed. And this site was this sort of really amazing mixture of old bits of city, old bits of industrial Manchester, with all sorts of odd bits that had been added at different points in time, and buried beneath all of this was a river that was either beneath a building, so it's partly culverted, or behind really tall walls. And so we knew from the start that from a landscape perspective, we were really connected far and wide in terms of the watercourse to nature beyond the city centre. But then we also had this amazing Mancunian character. And so our starting point as a design was to say that we don't want to lose that. And so the bits that we kept, the bits that we reused from the site, and really making sure that how we designed the landscape didn't feel too brand new and didn't feel too different or feel like it was somewhere else. It was all about how do you sort of maintain not just the Mancunianness, but how do you maintain the Mayfield character, and how do you make it feel as specific and special to this site. And then if you combine that in contrast to a huge amount of nature, you end up with a park that's looking backwards at its heritage and celebrating its heritage and its industrial past. But it's also looking forwards in terms of biodiversity, in terms of climate resilience. And I think that's what makes it really special, because it makes it feel like it is really special to its location, special to Manchester.
Yeah, well, it certainly is. And from a developer's perspective, Hen, what was the sort of macro vision when you first started out on this journey?
I think similar to what Becca's already said, from a partnership level, there was a really strong vision, and through the work we did with SEW in the bid stage, we did a lot of that work to just sort of make sure it wasn't just going to be similar to what other people had done. We really looked at what was missing in the city, and green space was sort of one of those things that was highlighted. So we've always sort of thought of it as a new green lung for the city, and sort of coming forward as a new green neighbourhood that actually we're seeing across the UK is getting a lot of attention about a different way to do development. I think it's fair to say when we set out, the original business plan didn't actually plan to have the park come forward first, and for different reasons we managed to do that as a partnership, and I think that has been so key to the success so far, and is going to be the success to this as a long-term place, because we've been able to see people use the park year on year. It's grown, it's got a bit more wild than sort of very new and fresh back in 2022 when it opened. And we've been able to see patterns of behaviour and how people use the park. So for us, it's sort of changed how we've looked at then the development buildings coming forward. And to your point earlier, Will, we are looking at how the park actually wraps around all of the buildings and goes into the buildings themselves. Originally, the plan was to have a park in the middle and buildings around it. So by watching people use the space all the time, sort of always getting feedback, learning from that feedback, the design of the buildings that are now being delivered will be better.
And it has matured, the park, and it's great the way it changes as the year evolves. But in terms of some of the boring stuff, i.e. how safe it is here and how it's managed, can you tell us about that? Because there's never any trouble in this park. It's a real safe haven, literally 2 minutes from Piccadilly train station. And I think the world's just beginning to know it's here, and everyone seems to be using it. But it is a very safe environment.
I think, again, comes back to the partnership and our original ambitions together. We've always sort of had key objectives, and one of them from the beginning was a place for all. And for it to be a place for all, that people want to spend time and be comfortable, it's got to be safe. For people to feel comfortable with having their children here, it's got to be safe. So it's something that, as partners, we've had to make a financial commitment to make sure the park was open, but it was opened with a huge level of care. That there is security here the whole time.
There's always people here, isn't there?
Yeah. And that was a bit controversial when that was first discussed. You opening a public space and then over-policing it by having security here. So the training and the individuals that form part of that team are key to people just being able to come here, enjoy it, and not have to think about that.
Yeah. And the security guards, they've all been trained in the history of the place. They understand the development. The gardener happily chats to people that are using the park, and I think that is really important, and it is credit to Danny, who runs this place, and his team, because it's much more than, it's not a security presence. They are managing the park and helping, I think, tell people what's coming next. And this wasn't an area, you said it, well actually it was Duncan, you said it, there was nothing really here, was there? And it's a surprising amount of space right next to an incredibly well-used station, huge potential, but when I started, I didn't know where Mayfield actually was. People now know Mayfield as a neighbourhood mainly because of the park.
And then our sort of job of doing that is to protect it as well, to make sure it sort of maintains that good quality for the sort of long-term sustainability of it, to make sure people want to continue using it and protecting it and have that long-term stewardship without us technically sort of putting someone in a job role that has to look after it.
And I wasn't going to go into too much of the history of the park today because you could probably do a separate podcast on it, but there is so much history on Mayfield. Did you incorporate that into the design of the park, the finishes?
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said before, the industrial heritage is a really important of how the park feels and how it roots and stitches or stays rooted in its context. So we haven't got like loads of information boards explaining the whole history of everything, but you can see it the closer you look around the park. There's like all the Victorian hogback beams that were found covering the river have been repurposed into the bridges, and if they're not in the bridges, they're sort of scattered in the landscape as balance beams for kids, and basically everything is influenced by the heritage and the history. And even like the playground you can see at the end of our view here, the chimneys, the reason why they're chimney shaped is obviously because there were chimneys here. Yeah. And so there's a huge amount of history that's embedded in the design, and even things like you can't quite see it yet, you're starting to see some of the purples come out of the planting, but when the salvias kick off at the entrance, there's sort of real sort of strong purple splodges through the planting beds, and that is a reference to the purples and the dyes and the interesting colours that Thomas Hoyle managed to create through all the different cloths that were created here. So from the top to the bottom of the design, there's obvious, but then there's lots of subtle details in the park that are all influenced by the site's heritage and history.
And then when the park's finished, it then becomes about activation and making sure that some meanwhile uses down here or some permanent uses. How did you set about activating with these guys behind?
So sort of again at partnership level, I think for it to work, we've got to be aligned with that sort of initial view of what we're doing, because there are so many problems that come up. If you didn't have that sort of strong vision from the beginning, you would easily potentially talk yourself out of doing it. So we looked at various different partners about sort of who could take on a space like the depot and bring it to life in a way that was going to be interesting and would just put Mayfield back on the map to the point we've talked about earlier. Most people didn't know of Mayfield. If they did, it probably was for something they couldn't talk about proudly because it was a dangerous place. So one of the early things we had to do as a partnership to make it sort of an attractive place for people to come and investment to follow was get people to come here and spend time here. So we got introduced to a company called Broadwick Live with Sim leading that business, who I think couldn't have nailed the brief more from the partnership. They've been amazing, and they see space in a different way to sort of how we do through a kind of technical design route. So we've learnt a lot from them as well. The way that they can use a space is so different to sometimes how we do in sort of the built environment. And I think one of the special things about what they've created at Depot, we've sort of done in a joint venture with Broadwick, as the partnership are in a joint venture with Broadwick, rather than just sort of letting some space and saying, activate it, please.
And will Broadwick here for the long term?
Yeah, so we're working out what that sort of looks like. Originally, they thought they'd be here for 3 years, then it was 5 years. It's been sort of 5 or 6 years, and there's a long journey to go on. There's big ticketed events like Warehouse Project, and it's become an iconic venue in its own right, voted best nightclub in the world. But actually the interesting thing for us is how it goes from Warehouse Project one night to the RHS doing their first urban flower show on a day, and then a big fashion shoot and fashion show that sits with it, and then big corporate events sort of taking over the space completely differently. And all of that has then been a test bed for future uses in the permanent buildings that we're designing as we're seeing them being used.
Well, Elise, who's helped organise the podcast, is a frequent visitor to the Warehouse Project, so it does get used. One of the big things for me since getting involved in the scheme was actually when you walk through the gates. It's unbelievable. The best environment in the city. If you want to work in a green area and relaxing area, 2 minutes from the train station, then there is nowhere else. But the approach, we set out and we looked at how do we improve that. When we walked here today, the roads are up. There's the public realm, the cafes going in right at the front. How did all that come through? And have you done the public realm at the front as well?
Yeah. So I've just spent the afternoon in a yard picking through different materials that we're looking to reuse it now. So,
the glamorous bit.
Exactly,
Pigeon
Triangle, which is still the best name for the space.
I love that. Yeah. Well, it's going to be an important piece of Pigeon Triangle, isn't it, for the scheme?
So what you've probably seen on the way in today is that a lot of the highways work's been done.
Yeah.
So that's about taking vehicles out of that space and giving it back to pedestrians.
What are you doing with the taxis?
So well, the taxis were there because they were. It's not actually a taxi rank. It's a queue that's waiting to join the taxi rank. So that is being displaced or rerouted.
Fantastic.
So we gain more pedestrian space around that amazing first building that you see, which is the ticket office. That's going to have cafe on the corner, and then in the little triangular space, Pigeon Triangle, we've landed upon an opportunity about 2 years ago or 18 months ago. I heard through Borough Happold, who are an engineer on the project. They heard through somebody else that a Chelsea gardener was looking for a home for bits of his garden, and so we presented that to the partnership. And I think the first feedback was a bit like, well, what, a posh garden from Chelsea is just going to land in Mayfield. Doesn't feel like it's sort of part and parcel of the narrative. And so we've done a lot of work on how we can not just do that, and we've repurposed and designed it and taken bits from that garden, but then blended them with things that we've been able to salvage from the site, but also local materials. And we ended up with a really interesting crafted garden that basically becomes a microdose of all of this in a proper postage stamp. So when you first come across the threshold into Mayfield, you get a sense of what you're then going to get a bigger feeling of when you come around the corner.
So it's exciting that the scheme it seems to be motoring when everyone else is struggling with viability, and it is difficult in terms of the overall economy, but we seem to be making progress month by month down here. And Becca, from your perspective, how important is a scheme like Mayfield to the wider city?
So, I mean, this is one of our major regeneration priorities. We have got several, but I think, it's been a 30-year process, but I sort of touched on it at the beginning. There's still loads to go at, but our approach has always been to look at an area, look at what we think will work there, what the opportunities are, what the constraints are. Certainly where we've got land ownership, we'll always use that to sort of help pump prime development and investment. But I think what we also try and do is create areas with a real character. And I will say, this park has probably been the one thing that is universally popular, to the extent that we're now looking at a similar sized park on the other side of the city down at Water Street, because I think green spaces, public realm, places where people can gather are so important. So thinking about Mayfield, by the station, Water Street down there, the green spaces, how people move between those spaces. It's not just about the frameworks themselves, it's about how they all fit together in the overall offer for the city. But here specifically, it is such prime development land. When you think about that connectivity, you're on the West Coast main line, so your connections to London and elsewhere are really strong, but you're also well connected to our own local transport system, the Metrolink, and there's just such huge potential. And in somewhere like London, this would be snapped up. It doesn't mean that viability is not a challenge. I mean, viability is a challenge all over the place, isn't it? But I think overall, what we know is Manchester's seen so much growth, but really for it to start properly punching above its weight, it needs to be more dense, and it needs to expand out, and it needs to go up, because we still have not yet got that critical mass of commercial space and housing. So we've got to look at all parts of the city centre and bring forward that densification. And that benefits the city, but it also benefits Greater Manchester, because then you've got an economic centre that can really deliver the kind of growth that not just Manchester and Greater Manchester needs, but the country needs. So we're really keen to work with partners like Landsec that will help us unlock some of that. And I've said it before, it's about being in it for the long haul, because none of this is easy. I mean, the park looks fantastic, but this wouldn't have come forward first without significant public sector investment.
Yeah. And on the viability and development pipeline, clearly we're facing a shortage, and it takes a brave developer, I'd say, to spec a 250,000 square feet grade A office building, which conveniently is right in front of the cameras today and in the background here. So works are flying on, Hen. Manchester's first office in a park, due for PC February 28. Yep. Can you tell us a bit more about the Republic?
Yes. I think we were nervous is probably the wrong word, but apprehensive to what the first building was going to be, because it's the design quality moving forward is going to be set by the first building in a way. So the amount of work that's gone into the size of the building, the materials used on the building, the materials used even in the interiors of the building has had years and years and years of work and a huge amount of people involved. I think back to the viability point, the reason we're in the position that we're in now to be making been able to make the investment decision to start on site all goes back to the partnership. Through working as public-private sector partners, we've been able to unpick problems that we wouldn't have been able to do if we were trying to do it in isolation. So I think the fact that that building's coming out the ground in this setting is all down to the fact that this was a public-private partnership. And then the building itself, it's green, which isn't just because it's next to a park.
Quite a lot of debate about the shade of green with planning. 18
months of debate about the exact shade of green and why that was important. But it was worth it, I think, for the design certainly improved from the help of the planners really challenging us, just to make sure that it's sort of not imposing on the park by delivering a sort of public amenity like the park we're sitting in today. Again, comes with the responsibility of not building buildings around it that ruin it. Yeah. So even the sort of the daylight and sunlight analysis is so extensive in development anyway, but we were doing it sort of against ourselves as a master plan, because you can't deliver an amazing public space and then ruin it. So the amount of sort of detailing that's gone into the materials and how the building will sort of look, where it sits in the park, has taken years and years and a few different iterations of it, but we're very proud of what's going to be delivered.
And 23,000 square foot floor plates in a diminishing supply market, it's set for commanding interest for some big tenants, and I think that's the real gap in the market. And it's certainly commanding. Even the first floor from here, it looks sort of floor 4 on a building, because it's sort of perched on the top as the site slopes downwards. So that's all set. And in terms of the next phase, well, it's part of the same phase, but the mobility hub and the Poulton.
Yeah, I think starting with the bigger building first in that phase, hopefully just gave confidence to the market that we weren't here to sort of do the smallest building in a almost apologetic way to see how it goes. So we sort of hope with starting the Republic that shows a good amount of confidence. And as you've sort of already said, Will, the journey from the station, we kind of heard that message loud and clear as a partnership, so we worked closely together to actually deliver those works sooner than was originally expected, because of how important it was going to be to make this place a success. The next 2 buildings get delivered together, which is a smaller office building of 100,000 square foot and a mobility hub, which is a car park but with additional services, so similar to what's been delivered over at Ancoats.
Cool. And just being down here, I think sometimes when you start developing big office buildings, there is a danger that you can alienate or intimidate some of the target audiences. But here, there's people cycling by, there's people running, there's children playing, families here chilling, people coming down after work. So in terms of your point, Becca, if you're going to do more of these across the city, I suppose making sure it's accessible is a key part to making and creating places.
Yeah, and that was one of the guarantees given by the partnership when we brought the park forward. This has to be a park for everyone. It's not just for the occupiers. Once these buildings are occupied, and you know there'll be people living here as well as people working here.
Yeah, that's a good point. So there is a lot of resi going to happen here.
Yeah, significant resi. So phase 1B, you'll have to remind me on the number of homes, but it's, so in 2 towers. So at the moment, it's already quite well used, but can you imagine sort of working in the Republic or the Poulton on a day like this and being able to come out and sort of, you know, on your lunch break or...
Well, there's going to be lots of positive research coming forward about working in a park is more productive, less absenteeism.
Yeah, so at the moment it does close at sunset and that is largely for security purposes, but as it starts to become more animated and you've got people working here throughout the day and living in the evening, or living here sort of, and coming home in the evening, it's going to change the dynamic. And as we've said, you know, it's also going to expand. There'll be more park because it's going to be built around and between and through the buildings. So yeah, it's really exciting to see it.
What do we think is going to be the biggest USP for the scheme? Is it 2 minutes from Manchester Piccadilly train station, or people want to work and live and socialise in a green space?
Both.
I think it's both. And I think what's unique is that you've got this green space next to a major transport hub.
And Duncan, how did you envisage when you started on this journey many years ago, before you'd had your 3 kids and you had a full head of hair, how did you envisage people using the park that either live or work here?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question because designers always have an idea of how people are going to use it.
Yeah.
And the most interesting thing about the human side of this is, as soon as it opened, you see people using it in a completely different way, which has been great. So, I mean, like some things we hope that, I mentioned before about like the beams that we've got scattered around, you sort of hope that kids might balance along it, they do that. Other areas, like in the playground, we had far more planting. Within a week, it was all trampled, and then we learnt a few lessons there. But in terms of like the mix of people, it's been fantastic to see such like a completely layers of generations. And I think that might also be because it's been a park first. So nobody coming here to the park is coming here to spend money. There's not a pay barrier to get into it, and so.
The ice cream van does very well.
Yeah, the ice cream does. They've definitely, but it's meant that people are coming to the park to use it as a park, and I think that's been a really interesting thing to see. And so when the office space comes along, I think that's why it'll feel more like you are working in a park, because the park's already there. The Mayfield neighbourhood's already created, and the people are already very much active in this space.
Do you think it could be a blueprint for more development, where we see more green spaces in city centres throughout the UK?
We hope so. It's been described as a blueprint by Nigel Dunnett, the late Nigel Dunnett, in an article for the RHS magazine.
Have you won any awards with your design on?
Too many awards that we lost count. Yeah, lots of awards, but across lots of different sectors, and so like we've won ecology awards, and we've won international awards, and we've won awards for design and sustain. So the awards have sort of been kind of coming thick and fast, really.
I think what we can see in it as well from watching people use it every day is what's missing as well. So again, we've not been sort of too rigid in the future phases that come forward in that thinking. So it was never planned to have such a significant park extension with the first homes coming forward. But it was just needed. We've seen how people use it, but we also can see the gaps in some spaces that people would like to get to use in the park. So we're able to then change our landscape brief, working with Duncan and his team, and make sure we respond to that.
And we've also, because we've set a high bar with this, for the rest of the public realm and the rest of the landscape, we're trying to do something better than we've done here. We're not trying to just roll it out. And so that's why the route to the station is a completely different thing, and it's got quite an interesting narrative in its own right. And that's the same for all of these extra little spaces. which is why we say like the park's going to get bigger and better, because the extra bits is not just going to be cut and paste of that, it's going to be something different. And I think, you know, as we sit here on a sunny day, there's not a huge amount of shade in this park, and people are fearful usually of development, and I actually think the development in some areas is going to create other spaces that are going to provide something different for different microclimates for different people on different days. So.
And different people is a good point, because we are going to have residents, people living here. We're going to have, I suspect, big businesses focusing on the Republic. But the fact we're doing a 100,000 square foot building with fairly small floor plates, circa 10,000, it means that there's going to be access for, you know, businesses. I would imagine by the time, if we get the mix right in the Poulton, it'll be accessible from 10 people upwards. And that's what really makes places as well. It's not just a few big businesses. And spec building a small floor plated building, again, is brave and it's unique, but it's needed to make sure it's accessible to all sizes of businesses. Is there anything special that you're doing with the Republic in terms of its design, Hen, which is sort of very different to the Republic?
For the Poulton?
Yeah.
As you say, it's sort of probably going to be for a different audience. So we've thought about that in the context of what the ground floor's like, what the amenity offer is, what the space on the roof terrace is. It's interesting for both buildings and future buildings at Mayfield that traditionally people try and negotiate as sort of high in the building as they can and want to have the top floors. And actually, when you get an opportunity to go into that building, the relationship that the lower floors have got to the park, you genuinely feel like you're in the park. And it'll be interesting to see as the building grows how much you get to a point where you've got a really beautiful view, but do you sort of have a different feeling of being in the park. So we think for both buildings that's quite an interesting sort of different take on how traditionally office buildings are let.
What are your plans, I should have asked, on the ground floor of these new office buildings? What's the activation plan?
Subject to the tenants that come forward.
You're going to put...
Because we've got a bit of flexibility. But yeah, F&B, we want it to be as active and public facing as we can. I think the whole ambition of basically the full 24 acres of this site being a public space means we don't want to sort of shut the doors and have a really exclusive feel at the kind of the front door to any of the buildings, whether it's the homes or the offices. So we've got sort of an interesting sort of food and beverage led strategy to activate all of the ground floors that will be particularly important with the first buildings coming forward. That there's permanent uses for people initially in the offices where they can get their lunch every day, where they can have dinner in the evening, what kind of sort of entertainment and activities are they going to be on top of what we've already got here.
Yeah. And in terms of the future phases, Becca, how much more is there to do?
Well, so we've got phases 1A, as you say, coming forward. So that's the Republic, Poulton and Mobility Hub. We're then looking at phase 1B, which are the first two resi blocks. We're actually looking at phase 3 next, which is subsequent residential as well. I think the biggest challenge is the depot building. So the original strategic framework retains the depot and has commercial buildings built on top. Now, I do think that is incredibly challenging, probably was then, even more so now. So as a partnership, I think it exemplifies the approach. We will be reviewing and looking at what we can do to make that development above the depot viable. The intention is certainly to retain part. It may be incredibly challenging to retain all of it, but I think it plays such an important role in the history and the feel and the sort of culture of this place. But yeah.
And do you see this as a real kickstart for the wider regeneration of Piccadilly? I mean, I was sort of bowled over really by Bev's presentation at MIPIM this year on the wider vision for Piccadilly, just how big it was.
So I think this has certainly kick-started development in and around Piccadilly. I think Piccadilly is a whole different proposition altogether, actually. So when the government, announced that they were proceeding with rail investment in the north, it was just such a positive for the north, but also for this area in particular. So we've been lobbying for literally decades to get investment in rail connectivity and the right rail investment as well. So people will probably be aware of the debate about whether the station goes underground or overground. If it goes overground, it takes a huge amount more development land and actually also requires a viaduct across Ardwick, which potentially causes huge amounts of blight. If it goes underground, it frees up all of that development land. And the scale of development in and around this wider area is huge. And I think for us, the real opportunity is to make this all greater than the sum of its parts. So if you combine Mayfield with Sister, with the Manchester Digital Campus, you know, looking out towards Ardwick, and some of our smaller SRFs like Piccadilly Village and Portugal Street East, you've got huge capacity. And how does it work as a whole? How does it become greater than the sum of its parts?
There's obviously loads to do, but it's really, really exciting times. And as I say, development and placemaking is never easy, but it is flying down here and it's looking great. Well done, Duncan.
Yeah, well done.
Well, well done everyone for all the work today, but plenty of hard work left. But thanks very much for taking the time today.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having us.